I woke up to the sound of voices I recognized, but not the tone. It wasn't grief or concern. It was something colder, businesslike. "She's old," Carter said, as if my age was a diagnosis in itself. Just let nature take its course. My body felt like it was made of wet sand, heavy limp. I couldn't open my eyes yet, but I was there. I was present. The machine behind me clicked and beeped slowly, reminding me that I hadn't left, not yet. "She's not even my real mom," he added quieter this time, but the word still landed. That one cut deeper than the tubes or the bruises. Not because it was new, but because I'd always hoped he'd outgrow that line of thinking. I'd raised him, cleaned up after him, waited up for him, paid for braces, bought the tux for prom, but none of that earned me a place in the bloodline ledger he still used to calculate worth. A nurse. Beth I'd come to know her name cleared her throat. I heard the quiet judgment in her tone. "Maybe you should step outside for now." Carter huffed, then silence, then the squeak of his shoes retreating down the hall. I stared at the inside of my eyelids, willed my fingers to twitch, but they wouldn't obey. Still, my mind was clear. My heart, slower than usual, was working harder than ever. I replayed his words, felt them wedge into the cracks left by years of quiet erosion. I wasn't surprised. Not really. But sometimes confirmation tastes worse than suspicion. I listened to the machines, to the way the air shifted around me once he was gone. I waited to feel anger or fear. Instead, what came was clarity. Not a dramatic breaking point, just a clean, dry snap. Let him think I'm slipping away. Let him think I won't come back. Because the woman he left in that bed, the one he expected to inherit from, not answer to, she wasn't the one waking up. She was gone. And I was opening my eyes now, slowly, to remember exactly who I used to be. And who I'd never be again. Carter was 5 when I met him. He stood half hidden behind Mitch's leg, holding a crumpled action figure in one hand and chewing the sleeve of his sweatshirt. His mother had been gone for almost 6 months by then, left for California with a musician and a bottle of gin, as Mitch told it. No calls. No postcards. Just quiet. I didn't expect anything from Carter. I wasn't looking to be anyone's replacement. Mitch and I met through the faculty book club of all things. He taught chemistry at the high school, and I was teaching introductory literature at the community college. We weren't in a rush for anything, but life moved forward anyway. The first time Carter let me brush the hair out of his eyes, he had a fever. Mitch was stuck, coaching the wrestling team at a tournament an hour away. I sat with Carter all night, wet cloth on his forehead, coaxing sips of Pedialyte through a bendy straw. He mumbled "mama" once, then caught himself, then whispered, "Low." That became our shorthand. I never corrected him. We got married the following spring. It was a simple backyard ceremony, just a few neighbors, a rented arch, and one chocolate-frosted cake. Carter wore a little bow tie and sneezed halfway through our vows. Mitch joked, we should have written him into the marriage certificate too. We laughed, and I held on to that moment tighter than I knew. The subject of adoption came up once, maybe twice. Mitch always waved it off. "You're the only mom he knows. That's what matters," he'd say. "It's just paperwork." So I kept showing up. Permission slips, dentist appointments, parent-teacher nights where the teacher would glance at me, glance at the sheet, then pause, "Stepmother," and I'd smile like that didn't split something inside me. I didn't want to force anything. I thought love shown consistently would build its own kind of bond. I thought blood didn't matter. When you were the one picking Cheerios out of the carpet and sitting front row at the school play. But Carter always called me Low. Never Mom? Not once, not even by accident. I told myself it was fine. It was our thing. Private, personal. It meant something. Now lying in that hospital bed, I heard how little it had meant to him. And in that quiet, something started to fall into place. Not everything I gave had vanished, it had just landed somewhere that wasn't him. I just hadn't realized who had held onto it. After Mitch died, the house got too quiet too quickly. The hospice bed was gone by the next morning, as if the room had to forget him before I could. The fridge still held a half carton of the vanilla pudding he'd requested during his final week. I couldn't bring myself to throw it out for days. Carter stayed for the funeral. He wore a dark gray suit that didn't quite fit at the shoulders, and he held my hand during the service, his thumb brushing over mine, like a child trying to remember how. People told me how lovely the eulogy was. I don't remember giving one. After the reception, Carter hugged me outside the church and promised, "I'll call you soon, Lo." He smiled, and for a moment, I believed him. He didn't call. At first, I told myself he was grieving. He'd lost his father, the only parent he had left by blood. I left him voicemails that were short and upbeat, the kind people can listen to in public without embarrassment. After a while, I stopped leaving messages altogether. Holidays were hardest. The first Thanksgiving after Mitch passed, I woke up at 5 in the morning to make Carter's favorite bourbon pecan pie from scratch. Same recipe I'd made since he was 12. I basted the turkey every 45 minutes, kept the rolls warm in foil, and set the table with cloth napkins I hadn't touched in years. Carter showed up 3 hours late, distracted already, full from his girlfriend's parents' earlier meal. He picked at the pie and left half his plate untouched. "Traffic's brutal," he muttered. "I've got an early morning tomorrow." He hugged me loosely, the kind of hug that felt more like permission to leave than an invitation to stay. The second Thanksgiving, he texted at noon to say he wasn't coming at all. By the third, I stopped setting the table. He'd always been a quiet kid. Even as an adult, he didn't say much, but Mitch had always translated his silences, filled the space between us. Now there was no one left to interpret the silence. Only me trying to find shape in the emptiness. I told myself he was building a life. Maybe he was. But the truth settled in, slow and sharp. He wasn't drifting because of grief. He was drifting because I no longer had anything he needed, except one thing, and that I was beginning to see was all he'd ever waited for. It happened on a Tuesday morning, the kind so ordinary it shouldn't have mattered. I was on my way to the library to return a mystery novel and drop off cookies for the front desk staff people who still looked me in the eye when they said my name. The road out past Hollow Bend curved gently near the tree line, the kind of turn I'd taken 100 times. I pressed the brake and felt nothing. Not softness, not hesitation, just air, like pressing into an empty pocket. The car jolted, dipped, then shot forward like it had been let loose. I don't remember the spin, only the crunch of metal and the smell of gasoline and something warm. My last thought before the darkness was simple. That's not how brakes fail. 2 weeks earlier, Carter had stopped by unannounced. He hadn't done that in months. I was startled to see him leaning against the porch railing when I returned from the market. "Just thought I'd check on you," he said too casually. "Your front tire looks low. I'll take the car around, back check the pressure." I hadn't asked. He hadn't waited for permission. When he returned the keys 20 minutes later, he smiled like it meant something. All good now. Now, in a bed that beeped and hummed and smelled of bleach and endings, I lay still while nurses fluttered in and out. Beth was the one who stayed the longest. Quiet, competent, not too young, not too quick to assume. She checked my IV line, adjusted my blanket, and didn't flinch when our eyes met and held for too long. "You're aware," she said once, not a question, but a statement. I didn't blink. She nodded and kept working. Every day since the crash, I pieced things together. The loosened mirror. The seat pushed too far forward. The glove box left open, oddly shuffled. Tiny things. On their own, they meant nothing. Together, they formed a shape. A shape Carter would never admit to. A shape I could no longer ignore. I let them think I was fogged by medication, dulled by trauma. But I was clearer than I'd been in years. and I was done pretending I couldn't see what had already been set in motion. He came back the next day. Carter, clean-shaven, crisp, buttoned down the good shoes he usually saved for job interviews. He stood beside my bed with the same expression he wore at his father's memorial, respectful, somber, unreadable. But this time, there was no grief to carry, only calculation. He glanced at the machines, then at me. My eyes stayed shut. My breath shallow, steady. I heard the soft click of his phone screen. A few taps. A pause. Then again, tap, swipe, scroll. I strained to make sense of the shapes behind my eyelids until I caught the phrase he whispered to himself. Advance directive template. He placed something down on the tray beside me. I couldn't see it, but I could feel its presence. A sheet of paper, maybe two. He didn't say a word, just adjusted the blanket around my feet like he cared. Then he left. Beth came in 15 minutes later. She didn't speak, just watched me like she was waiting for confirmation. I gave it to her the only way I could. 3 slow taps on her wrist as she checked my pulse. She didn't blink, just nodded once and walked out of the room. By nightfall, a man appeared at the window beside my bed. No badge, no clipboard, just a navy windbreaker and quiet eyes. He waited until Beth closed the door behind her. Then he stepped forward and said, "You remember me?" I did. Tom Ellison. I'd hired him during the divorce when I needed proof Mitch was hiding assets before the will was finalized. Tom never asked for more information than necessary. That's what I liked about him. I've been tracking a few things already, he said, pulling out his phone. Visitor logs, street camera footage, Carter's online activity while he was logged into hospital Wi-Fi. He tapped once. He opened a file titled Living Will, Editable. Placed a draft on your tray. Unwitnessed. Unfiled. But he was prepping it. Beth folded her arms. And you said someone else looked through the glove box. Tom nodded. Emily, the night before the crash, street cam caught her car in the driveway. She told hospital staff she'd been in Portland. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. The silence around me had done all the talking. Beth picked up the tray and swept the papers into a folder. I'll handle this, she said, then turned to me. You just rest. But rest wasn't what I had in mind. Not anymore. I was ready. And I knew exactly who to call next. It was 2 months before the crash when the feeling started. Not fear, something quieter. A kind of stillness in my chest that didn't belong there. It came in the form of a question I hadn't let myself ask in years. What would happen to everything I built when I was no longer around to explain it? I called James Daly the next morning. He'd handled Mitch's estate after the cancer took him. Steady, polite, the kind of lawyer who still wore cufflinks to a Tuesday meeting and brought his own pen just in case. We met in his office downtown across from the florist that always smelled like wet stems. I slid the old will across the desk, followed by the deed, the insurance policies, the accounts. He raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. Then I took out a small photo creased at the corners, still tucked behind the frame of my dresser mirror. April Dawson. She was 6 the year she came to stay. Her mother had died, and her father was in court-ordered rehab. I'd taken her in for 6 months until placement came through. She called me Mama Rain the second night, then every night after. She'd stir the sugar into my tea when I was tired, tape her drawings to my fridge. When she left, she promised she'd write, and she did. A card every Christmas, letters that smelled like citrus and perfume. She's 32 now, running a shelter in Boise for women coming out of violent homes. Her last letter came on my birthday. Inside was a Polaroid of her standing beside a woman and 2 children, a hand resting lightly on all of them. You saved me, so I could save them. That was all she wrote. I looked at James and said, I want everything to go to her. The house, the savings, the life I built. If she can't be located within 30 days of my death, I want it all to go to the shelter she works for. James didn't flinch. He adjusted his pen and asked, "Would you like this to be contest proof?" "Yes," I said. "Ironclad. I don't want a single cent in the hands of people who waited for me to die." He nodded, and for the first time in years I exhaled without hesitation. We signed everything that afternoon, and as I walked back to my car, I felt something loosen in my spine, not revenge, not grief, just the quiet certainty that love, when returned, was worth rewriting everything for. Carter arrived 4 days after I left the hospital. Black slacks, black-tied dress shoes with a fresh polish, the kind of outfit worn not out of mourning but performance. He walked through the lobby like he had somewhere important to be and expected the room to bend around him. At the front desk, he gave his best version of solemn. "Room 214, he said. "I'm here to collect her things and speak to someone about next steps." Beth had been expecting him. She didn't blink, didn't rise from her chair, just typed something into the computer slowly, then looked up. "She was discharged last night," she said. "All arrangements were made. Her lawyer handled everything." Carter's jaw worked in a tight circle. By who, Beth didn't answer. She reached into the drawer and handed him a sealed manila envelope. No name, no return address, just thick paper and thicker truth. He took it, hesitated, then opened it right there in the lobby. A single page. My handwriting. "You always assumed I wouldn't outlast your patience. You were wrong. You always assumed silence meant permission. It didn't. I know everything. And I left you nothing. No signature. No affection. Just one final truth: I may have raised you, but I no longer claim you." He stood there for a full minute, unmoving. A couple in scrubs passed behind him, whispering. One of the interns glanced over, confused. But Carter didn't seem to notice the eyes, just the words. Beth stood and straightened the edge of the desk. "There's nothing more here for you," she said gently, but without room for interpretation. He folded the letter without looking at it and walked out of the hospital without asking another question. 3 houses down, I sat, propped up in Grace Halberg's attic, a blanket over my knees, a thermos of tea warming my hands. From the window, I watched his car pull out of the lot. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't wonder whether he would call, because I knew exactly where he was going next. Carter's truck rumbled up the drive like it owned the gravel. He parked crooked engine still running and walked straight to the front door with that same hurried confidence he used to carry through his father's garage, like things would open for him just because they always had. The handle didn't turn. He jiggled it once. Then again, nothing. The deadbolt held. Mounted next to the door was a new brass plaque. Below it, a laminated sign clipped to the window pane. "This property is under legal review. For all inquiries, contact Daly and Associates." A silver sedan pulled up before Carter could process it. A tall man in a navy suit stepped out, clipboard in hand. Mr. Carter Whitmore Carter turned. "Who are you?" "I'm here on behalf of James Daly. I'm the acting property manager for Lorraine Whitmore's estate." His voice was calm, rehearsed. "Effective immediately, this property is no longer within your legal access. You are not listed as an heir. Do not attempt entry. Any future trespassing will be reported." Carter's mouth opened, then closed. "There must be a mistake. I'm her son." The man didn't argue. He simply reached into his briefcase and handed over a sealed envelope. Carter didn't open it. Not right away. He stood there on the porch, still facing the door as if it might change its mind. But the lock didn't care who he was. He finally tore the envelope open, read the page inside. The words were the same. My handwriting. My last word delivered when I was no longer in the room to soften it. "I may have raised you, but I no longer claim you." He didn't crumble, didn't shout, just stepped back onto the gravel and stared at the house, his reflection faint in the darkened window. blocked by a world that no longer recognized him. I watched it all from Grace's attic. The tea had gone cold in my hands, but I held it anyway. Below me, Carter stood in the driveway without a key, a plan, or a mother to go back to. And that was when the second car pulled in. The road to Second Bloom curved through pine and quiet, the kind of silence that didn't ask anything of you. I arrived with a small suitcase, a binder of legal copies, and a name I was finally reclaiming as my own. The house wasn't a facility. It wasn't a shelter. It was a place built by women who had once been dismissed, overlooked, or spoken over, now choosing something else. There were no intake forms, no wristbands, just first names and the space to breathe. Margie was 71. Her son had forged her signature to empty her pension. Diane had left a marriage after 40 years and a single slap. Ruth had gone silent after her daughter chose money over memory. None of them looked like victims. They looked like roots that had refused to rot. We didn't speak everything at once. Some of it came in pieces over soup in the garden through letters never sent. We watered plants and pulled weeds. Some of us cried. Some didn't. I slept for 12 hours that first night. No machines, no footsteps outside my door. When I woke up, I wrote my name on a paper and pinned it above my bed. Just Lorraine. Not Lo, not Mom, not Mrs. Whitmore. No one asked me who I had been. They asked who I was becoming. And slowly, I stopped measuring my worth by the people who walked away. I stopped needing Carter's silence to explain anything to me. Because this time, I wasn't rebuilding. I was planting something entirely new, and I knew exactly where it would grow from.